From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Sweeney Gray. The Canadian government has written to Venezuela saying it will not authorize the installation of polling stations in their country for Sunday's votes. The Venezuelan government has already distributed voting materials to all embassies and consulates to guarantee the right of all Venezuelans to vote. Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza is condemning the move. He said the government of Canada is violating the rights of the 5,000 Venezuelans who want to vote.
Canada
is not happy with all these sanctions applied against even more Venezuelans than the US government. So in a statement they declare that they won't allow Venezuela's government to install polling stations in our embassy and consulates in their country.
Still in Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro has said his administration will take action to provide social protection against international aggressions and harassment. Regarding relations with the United States, Maduro reaffirmed Venezuela's willingness to dialogue based on mutual respect and sovereignty. He also called on the Venezuelan people to ratify the victory of the Bolivarian government in the election on May 20th.
We have always been open to a dialogue with the government of the United States. When the Bolivarian Revolution was founded 20 years ago by our Comandante Chavez, the President of the United States was Bill Clinton. With Clinton, there was always a possibility of dialogue. Then George Bush came, and Venezuela's policy turned to the extreme right, so much that he participated in the execution of the coup against Comandante Chavez in 2002. Then Barack Obama's administration arrived, and there was hope for Latin America. But Barack Obama left a disastrous legacy on Venezuela by allowing the U.S. government to do anything against our country. However, I am willing to have a respectful dialogue if the United States ceases the aggressions against our democratic country.
Opposition candidate Henry Falcon is naming who he thinks should be in his cabinet if he wins the election. He was speaking in a live interview on Global TV.
Francisco Rodriguez should be the new Minister of the Economy, and Claudio Fermin is an extraordinary politician, so he should be the one who names the new cabinet, taking into account international relationships with the United States and Colombia. Yesterday I talked to the Colombian Foreign Minister, Maria Angela Holguin. When I was in the United States, we talked to important members of the U.S. government.
That's where you proposed Eduardo Fernandez as foreign minister?
Yes. He as foreign minister, and Julio Cesar Pineda would be Venezuela's representative in the U.S. That is how we are building a great team, where the most important thing is intelligence, science, commitment, and responsibility.
Switching to news now out of Nicaragua, where talks have begun to resolve issues around the recent violence in the country. The negotiations include the government, church, members of the private sector, and student organizations. From Tuesday 15th at midnight, the seminary of Our Lady of Fatima was declared a safe zone. The police have banned people from bringing guns or fireworks into the area.
Hemos conocido muy de cerca.
We have known very closely the pain of war, the pain of violence. A lot of Nicaraguans lost their loved ones in the last part of the 20th century, a war that took more than 50,000 lives. Brothers fighting in a war. Camilo, my youngest brother, was captured, tortured, and murdered. He was a young man like you. Since I was 14 years old, I had to relieve the repression, to torture, the prison. I was in prison for more than 7 years.
And for more on those talks, we go now to our correspondent, Maria Jose Diaz in Managua.
Today we witnessed a very tense environment at the opening of the National Dialogue. Some sectors, including the Catholic Church, have demanded that President Daniel Ortega immediately stop police repression and that the armed police units be withdrawn from the streets. In response, President Ortega quoted a message from the Episcopal Conference in which all sectors were called on to avoid violence. However, violent acts committed by opposition groups have continued, resulting in killings, damage to public and private property, and looting. President Ortega reaffirmed that the police have been instructed not to shoot, but they are still responsible for maintaining order. He also said that people have called for justice and for conditions to return to normal so that they can travel and work safely. His exact words were, "Stop killing Nicaragua as you have been doing. No matter what your religion or your political ideology, no more blood from our brothers and sisters should be spilled." President Ortega also thanked the Episcopal Conference for the extraordinary effort to create the National Dialogue sessions. But on the other hand, the Catholic Church has asked for everyone involved in the violence to send a clear message so that they can come to an agreement and everything can be in place to start working towards Nicaragua's peace agreement next Friday.
A new report into electoral fraud in Colombia has unearthed a mafia network inside the National Registration Office, along with the manipulation of public documents.
Imprimir tarjetas electorales es un negocio.
Leon Valencia, director of the Peace and Reconciliation Foundation, reported that the registration office is altering the results of elections by selling vote packs.
They sell them for around $600. This is what they call an electoral reserve. These are being sold by corrupt lawyers, officials, former officials, and politicians inside the institution.
Irregularities may have been happening as far back as when election judges were first chosen. The e-forms, in which the results of each voting station are registered, were manipulated.
We don't like the random and shady way in which the people in charge of every polling station were selected. Before, there were also people arriving at the stations even before the people in charge had arrived. In second place, there were more than 2,000 E14 forms that don't match with the official results.
According to investigations, these are not only files being altered. The digitalization of data goes into a software system that has already been manipulated before.
We ask for an audit to know the main codes, algorithms, and the randomness of the system.
In spite of the alerts and reports, the National Registration Office hasn't taken actions to eliminate electoral fraud.
We had reported about this before. We told them that illegal funding of campaigns could happen and how it could have been manipulated by corrupt political figures.
Colombians don't trust the results of the elections.
There is more behind this. We still don't know the whole truth, but we all must vote to take the power back.
Electoral corruption puts Colombian democracy in great risk.
We'll take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. We return with news that Ecuador's President Lenin Moreno has appointed a new economic minister. Denise Herrera has more.
The Ecuadorian government has announced Richard Martinez will be the new Minister of Economy, replacing Maria Elsa Viteri. New Minister Martinez, formerly the head of the Ecuadorian Business Committee, thanked Lenny Moreno on his Twitter account. This decision has sparked mixed reaction.
We believe that appointing a person linked to the private sector to be in charge of the Chamber of Commerce will try to find a way to build an alliance between the state and the private sector, something that the President of the Republic has also announced before.
During Rafael Correa's administration, he placed greater emphasis on allocating resources to the Ecuadorian people, a stark contrast to the administrations before him, whose policies were seen as benefiting the elites. Now there are calls to have more measures that will support small business.
It is necessary to open new markets because Ecuador needs to attract foreign currencies, needs to export, needs to promote big businesses in order to promote small businesses.
Former Minister Viteri has told a local media that she believes it's a terrible mistake to focus only in the private sector of the country. Moreno has reevaluating the composition of his cabinet, and the final cabinet will be revealed on May 24. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Quito, Ecuador.
And relatives of the kidnapped and murdered employees of the Ecuadorian newspaper El Comercio are in Colombia to ask for help to recover their bodies. The two journalists and their driver were kidnapped and murdered at the Ecuadorian-Colombia border last April, allegedly by the Olivier Sinisterra Front. Now their families want the Colombian government to help find their bodies and also to join an ongoing international investigation to determine what really happened. Hundreds of people have marched in Buenos Aires to reject President Mauricio Macri's economic measures and to demand better actions against high inflation. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Egado Esteban, has more.
Public workers, social movements, and pensioners have mobilized to the streets of Buenos Aires to demand the government of Mauricio Macri increase salaries and take action against high inflation, which increased 10% in the last 4 months, making basic goods difficult to afford, especially for people with less income. Protesters also rejected the negotiations between the government and the IMF after the bad economic experiences of the past, which brought a major economic crisis affecting the poorest sector of the country.
On May 18th, the world celebrates the 11th annual Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia. Cuba has been holding a series of events since May 4th. For the second year in a row, there are calls to end homophobia and transphobia in schools. Our correspondent in Havana, Laura Prada, tells us more.
Alba is a Colombian modern activist for girls and boys who are discriminated against and bullied because of their gender identification. She became an activist after her son Sergio Urrego committed suicide after being ostracized in school. She believes schools should teach respect for others without labels.
Creating an educational environment free from discrimination and safe for our children is very important for me. Today, we can see many statistics that show that many of our children take the decision to commit suicide.
The creation of a space for dialogue on activism networks are some of the activities plans for the Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia. People who attend share their lives' stories. Oscar winner Danny Vega is a supporter of the event.
There
is a good move, and we are attempting to bring the rights of the LGBTI community to schools, universities, technical training centers, and places that promotes social growth and reflection.
This year's theme again centered its work on creating schools free of discrimination. For 30 years, the National Center for Sexual Education, CENESEX, have been promoting work on topics like gender education and inclusivity, child abuse, therapy, and sexual orientation.
One of the most interesting things of CENESEX's work has been precisely the changes inside their own institution since the 1980s. Of course, handling these changes at a time where national and international issues related to sexual education were not open to debate. So there has been a change from a more scientific point of view to respect gender, identity, and human rights.
Above all, the Cuban Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia hopes to create a more inclusive society. Laura Prada, Telesur Havana.
Thousands have marched in the streets of Santiago, Chile again to demand a university environment free of sexism, harassment and sexual abuse. Over 30 institutions and hundreds of protesters have picked up the call for university directors to foster programs which promote equality and mutual respect on campus. The first two protests ended in clashes with the police. And our correspondent in Chile, Paola Dragnich, is reporting that appears to be the case again.
More than 100,000 people gathered in Alameda Avenue in this massive demonstration against sexist education. However, once again, it ended in violent incidents and police repression. We don't understand why the police never seem to arrest the people that actually engaged in provocations while wearing hoods, with their faces masked, but instead arrest the students that are marching peacefully as part of the demonstration. We haven't seen the demonstration quite this big in a while. The Alameda Avenue is still blocked and the Water Canyon tracks are still being left off at the students. This is a part of the feminist wave that arrived in Chile and is here to stay, with the demand that laws against gender violence be reformed.
The General Office of Electoral Offences is working on the possibility of submitting a case against the President. I believe the information should be ready in 15 days, so we will be able to proceed with the submission of the case.
Women in the Dominican Republic have gathered at the National Congress calling for the decriminalization of abortion. A delegation handed a letter to lawmakers where they warned that criminalization of abortion is putting the lives, health, and dignity of women at risk. They are calling on the Dominican public health care providers to allow abortion when the pregnancy is not viable or is the result of rape or incest. Abortion in the Dominican Republic is currently punished with 2 to 3 years prison for women and 3 to 4 years for the doctors and medical staff involved.
We are going to continue our fight until a new law that respects women is passed. We want a criminal code that recognizes our rights. We say no to the bill proposed by Senator Felix Bautista because it means a step back for our access to health care and justice for victims of sexual violence.
A magnitude 5.2 earthquake has struck southern Mexico, triggering alarms and evacuation procedures in Mexico City. The tremor, which was centered in the state of Guerrero, was felt in Mexico City as hundreds of people left office blocks and gathered in the streets. The country is still recovering from 2 large earthquakes that caused widespread damage in September 2017. And also in Mexico, a Center for Young Writers in Mexico City has been set up to encourage children to use their imagination to write in different styles. It also promotes reading in a country where the study of literature is declining.
You don't need to be an adult to write fiction or non-fiction based stories. In this classroom, children learn about all kinds of literary genres. Nayeli, at her young age, has acquired the necessary skills to write stories.
Most stories are about mystery. It's something I like to write about a lot. Others focus on love and other emotions.
Their imagination is their main tool, but they also shape stories from their lives and they share them with their families and friends.
I invented a little Chinese girl who hated people. She did not like humanity, so she built a robot instead. The robot ended up hating her for being human. In the end, the robot makes a better world.
9 years ago, Roxana Erdmann created the School for Young Writers, where through simple techniques, children are encouraged to enter the fascinating world of literature.
We all have music classes, painting classes, sculpture lessons, and sport for children. But writing has been limited to school assignments. It is not considered as an art anymore, as enjoyment, and above all, means of expression.
The project also aims to encourage better reading habits in this country, where, despite a rich literary heritage, people are reading less and less.
I think something is failing in the school system because it promotes writing at an academic level, where you have to follow certain rules, but they forget that a child can develop creative writing skills, and this is why it's a very important project, because they are encouraging and developing reading and writing habits in children.
According to the latest numbers of the National Institute of Statistics, Geography, and Informatics, 45% of Mexicans read just one book a year. The other 55% did not read any kind of literary text.
Thousands of people have marched through Cape Town to mark Nakba Day, an annual event which commemorates the displacement of Palestinians in 1948 and to protest against the killing of Palestinian protesters by Israeli forces. Other demonstrations also took place across South African cities on Tuesday in support of Palestine. This after Israeli forces opened fire on Palestinian protesters on the Israel-Gaza border on Monday, leaving at least 60 dead and over 2,400 wounded. Hundreds of public healthcare workers took to the streets of Paris to condemn budget cuts to the French healthcare system. Protesters marched through the streets of the French capital to the Ministry of Health while chanting anti-Macron slogans. France leader Emmanuel Macron is facing growing pressure from workers across the country protesting against his labor reform proposals. North Korea has threatened to cancel a summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and its leader Kim Jong-un. In a statement, the North Korean government said it is not interested in talks where the U.S. insists upon one-sided demands to give up its nuclear program. They have also rejected the suggestion of the Libyan model for denuclearization suggested by the U.S. National Security Advisor. North Korea is skeptical about the Libyan model where Muammar Gaddafi gave up nuclear weapons after an agreement in 2002 and 2003 with US and the UK, but was then killed in NATO bombings. And in an abrupt move, North Korea also suspended high-level talks with the South over a joint military drill between the US and South Korea. Pyongyang denounced the drill as a rude and wicked provocation and said it is against the trend of warming North-South ties. The talks between the two Koreas were scheduled for Wednesday. South Korea regrets the move and hopes that the talks will resume soon.
Inter-Korean talks must continue in order to discuss issues raised by the North. The government will pursue necessary measures through close consultations with relevant ministries to achieve sustainable development of inter-Korean relations and permanent peace settlement through the implementation of the Panmunjom Declaration.
And for a look at Washington's reaction to North Korea's decision, we go now to our correspondent, Jorge Arreaza.
The White House spokeswoman Sarah Sanders says that if the North Koreans want to meet, will be okay, and if they don't, will be okay too. And also she added, and I quote, "This is something that we fully expected." Most definitely, North Korea says that the comments of John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, that they want to follow a model that happened with Libya, was a very provocative statement, because 8 years after that nuclear deal with Libya, Muammar Gaddafi has been killed. Nothing is already written in stone. We know that today was supposed to be a summit between South Korea and North Korea, and given the exercises, the military exercises between the US and South Korea, North Korea understand that that is a very provocative action and also was playing a key role to suspend that summit. What's going on in the future remains to be seen. We get back to you now.
We thank Jorge Arreaza for that report. Now, China has expressed its concern over the cancellation of the inter-Korean talks and urged both sides to avoid worsening the situation.
We support and hope that both sides of the DPRK and the ROK will follow the spirit of dialogue, reconciliation, and cooperation embodied in the Panmunjom Declaration, fully show the respect for each other's reasonable concerns, work toward the same directions, build mutual trust, and improve ties.
And that has brought us right to the end of this news brief, but for these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at tellus4tv.net/English. You should also check us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Suni Gray. Thank you so much for watching.